On August 14, 1945, just days after the Americans had dropped the second atomic bomb over Japan, a few Americans learned that the war was finally over. Many think that the first person to learn this news was the U.S. President, Harry S. Truman. They would be wrong. The first American to know that World War II was finally over was a quiet, unassuming grade school teacher from Kansas who was one of 10,000 women who served in the U.S. military, secretly decrypting enemy messages, including the final one of the war. In an era where women were typically limited to housework, these women worked tirelessly in the shadows to help the Allies win the war, one cipher at a time. Welcome to Facts Fanatics. We are dedicated to bringing you the most shocking and unbelievable real-life incidents that stunned our world. Here are the incredible true stories of the Code Girls, the women codebreakers who played a crucial role in winning World War II. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, men rushed to volunteer to fight in the Army or Navy. Most men considered any military duty that didn't involve combat as being beneath them. Thus, the military faced a problem. How would they staff the many necessary roles they needed in other areas besides combat? At that moment, the U.S. government decided to recruit women to work in the highly sensitive field of deciphering and cryptography, aka codebreaking. The U.S. military contacted mathematics and astronomy professors to hand-pick their best students for the Herculean mission ahead. They were looking for young, intelligent women with an aptitude for mathematics and exceptional language skills. Thus, the quest to recruit women from all over the U.S. to perform the highly crucial and sensitive secret work for the U.S. government started when young women who were seniors in college or school teachers found letters, odd invitations, or direct invites to meet certain professors who were only interested to know two things in particular. 1, were they interested in crossword puzzles? And 2, were they engaged to be married? The answers had to be a yes and no in that order, and a positive response would take the candidate to the next level of selection, where they were sworn to an oath of secrecy. The young women were offered training with the government with the promise of government jobs in Washington upon graduation from the intense training program. The government started recruiting these women to a secret society where they weren't even allowed to tell their families about their jobs. This was top secret intelligence in war, and the penalty for leaking any information meant death. More than 10,000 extraordinary women were picked out from all over the U.S. to carry out the daunting task of deciphering enemy messages. These women went through grueling courses in cryptography, where they were taught how to decode encrypted messages. They studied long strings of letters and numbers, looking for patterns that might give a clue to hidden messages and sentences that looked like total nonsense. Within a few weeks of working at these tasks painstakingly, these school teachers and college co-eds were breaking enemy codes. Although many young women were being recruited to decipher these codes, the military also needed a mentor for the young women. There was only one person suitable for that job. That one woman, with a sharp mind and nerve-breaking stamina, was responsible for decoding hundreds of ciphers during her tenure as America's first female cryptanalyst during the years before World War II. Before World War II, she had already been responsible for busting a smuggler's ring by breaking the smuggler's codes. This woman was Elizabeth Friedman. She was born in 1892 in Huntington, Indiana. She belonged to a Quaker family and studied poetry and literature. She graduated from college and settled down in Chicago. Being a devout Shakespeare fan, she religiously visited the local library. There, she caught a librarian's eye, who later introduced her to George Fabian, a millionaire seeking researchers to work on Shakespeare's code-cracking project. She happily agreed and moved to Geneva, Illinois, where she met her future husband, William Friedman. When the war broke out in 1941, she and her husband became the leaders of the first ever code-breaking unit, intercepting and deciphering encrypted messages. Though she had never been formally trained as a codebreaker, her natural fluency and skill at the process turned out to be an unmatchable asset in a time of war. Historian Butler Greenfield claims she was extraordinarily good at recognizing patterns, and she would make what looked like guesses that turned out to be right. In fact, after World War I, she was hired by the U.S. Coast Guard. where she and her clerk cracked more than 12,000 codes using only pencil and paper that led to 650 prosecutions. She was eventually successful in breaking one of the Nazi codes. Although Elizabeth Friedman is known as America's first female codebreaker, she was never given the public recognition of that honor from her country. She had been sworn to secrecy by her government and honored that oath. Instead, many people credited her husband, William Friedman, as the godfather of the NSA. Until her death in 1980, Elizabeth never revealed her role in saving the United States during World War II. Elizabeth Friedman was not the only member of the secret society of women cryptographers. She and her husband William also discovered an incredibly talented cryptographer who was a genius in deciphering code due to her impeccable mathematical skills. Her name was Genevieve Grotjahn, an outstanding student with natural excellence in mathematics. Genevieve graduated from the University of Buffalo in 1936, which was located in her hometown. Her dreams to teach mathematics at the college level were dashed when she wasn't granted the post because she was a woman. Grotjahn dejectedly started working for the government, calculating pensions. It was her extraordinary aptitude in mathematics that caught the eye of William F. Friedman. Friedman and his team had been nerve-wrackingly working for months to break the codes of the Japanese diplomatic cryptography machine, Purple. The British military had given up on the idea of breaking the Purple code, finding it impossible to break. Friedman took his chances on Grotjahn and welcomed her to his team as a codebreaker. His decision turned out to be correct. She immediately proved her skill and was instrumental in cracking the uncrackable Japanese code of Purple. Once the United States could crack the Purple code, they could now start to understand more about Japanese troop movements, shipping and supply lines, and strategy. Understanding the Japanese Purple code was crucial in U.S. intelligence moving forward to shorten the war. It is safe to say that Grotjahn's discovery as a cryptanalyst changed the course of history. Unfortunately, like many of the 10,000 women, she was never honored during the war or for many years afterward. However, today, the breakthrough in deciphering the Japanese Purple code machine has been called, in the Encyclopedia of American Women at War, one of the greatest achievements in the history of U.S. codebreaking. During the beginning of World War II, Virginia D. Adderholt was another codebreaker and was considered no more than just another of the 10,000 other female recruits who worked behind the scenes, keeping the Army officials updated with the latest deciphered information. But on August 14, 1945, she entered the annals of history. At noon, August 14th of 1945, Arlington Hall, the office where Adderholt was working, received an intercept from Tokyo to the Japanese embassy in Bern, Switzerland. Adderholt had spent 4 years in Japan, so she was fluent in Japanese. She was the perfect candidate to both decipher and translate the message. Adderholt was able to decipher and translate this message simultaneously. The moment she read the message, she gasped and stopped herself. She was the first person in the United States to learn that the Japanese had unconditionally surrendered. Even before the President of the United States, she knew the war was over. In order to get to that day of August of 1945, Adderholt had worked tirelessly day and night, one after the other, while deciphering numerous enemy codes, all while she was considered an inferior worker compared to her male counterparts. Many of the people in the Army thought her to be a lowly secretary, yet she could not tell them of the critical work she was doing. Despite her disadvantages, Adderholt clawed her way up to the top, where she worked as the head of one of the U.S. Army's secret cryptography units. No other person had the same knowledge and ease with ciphers and Japanese as her. Despite her pivotal role in ending the war, Adderholt, like so many other women, was sworn to secrecy, and only after years are we allowed to discuss her contribution to the war effort. The women of Groucho College in 1942 and many other women who accepted the call of duty from the military were also known as WAVES, Women Accepted of Voluntary Emergency Services. Frances Steen was one of those women who answered the call. Steen belonged to a family of patriots who would go any lengths to serve their country, the sort of family that saved grease from bacon that could be used to make glycerin for bombs. Her brother was assigned duty in the Atlantic in the Navy, and she wanted to do her part. Like the other women of Groucher College, she was given the difficult task of decoding the complex German Enigma code machine. In a locked room in a tall building located on the Groucher College campus, Steen and 9 other women learned cryptology under the supervision of a Pulitzer Prize winner and Navy official. The work was demanding and constant without a break. These women were expected to work 12-hour shifts. They were required to have a strong understanding of the mathematic algorithms that created the ciphers in the first place. These women needed excellent memory, patience, persistence, and intuition. With codes, the women were expected to work for days, months, and even years, and they still failed due to the changing ciphers. Everybody was sweating. Their dresses were plastered to their arms, explained Liza Mundy, author of Code Girls, the untold story of the American women codebreakers of World War II. It was also emotionally draining. Steen and the others were aware that somebody might die if they made a mistake. As the war progressed, Steen was promoted to lieutenant. She didn't know it then, but she was about to change the course of the war. Due to her uncanny gift of mathematics, she was one of the women who helped decipher the encrypted messages which identified the exact plans of Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor attack. That decryption allowed the U.S. military to determine Yamamoto's precise travel plans on a specific day in April 1943. He was scheduled to inspect his troops on Japanese bases in the South Pacific, and on April 18, 1943, the U.S. was able to dispatch a flight of fighter planes to shoot down the famed Japanese admiral. Steen died in 2007 at the age of 86 due to natural causes, but her son describes her code-breaking skills as highly analytical and different from most people. Some experts believe that without the women's codebreakers, World War II would have lasted 2 years longer than it initially did. These women and thousands of others endured the workload and constant stress and were subjected to unequal pay and hardly any benefits. They bore criticism and mockery. Many of these women had to endure the rumors spread that they were prostitutes in uniform and were just there to service the men. The stories grew viciously over the years to the point that many parents refused to allow their daughters to volunteer for military service. Frances Steen, Virginia Adderholt, Elizabeth Friedman, and countless women dedicated their lives to a vital part of the war victory. Sworn to secrecy for national interest, these women remained tight-lipped about their service. Only after Liza Mundy's book, Code Girls, The Untold Story of the American Women Codebreakers of World War II, did these women get the limelight they deserved. Almost 3/4 of a century after the war, the Codebreakers' story is out, and their outstanding contributions to winning the war can now be celebrated publicly. If you like this video, please help us to ensure that we can continue to provide similar stories by pressing the like button and subscribing to our channel.